Okay, we are going to call the City Council to order for January 23rd, and the first order of business is our flag salute and moment of silence. Councilor Gilman will lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, our first order of business, as usual, is oral communication, and this evening we have expanded that slightly to include a focus on citizens' input on the storm of January 4th, and in particular the issue of the tidal damage at the high school parking lot that impacted many residents' cars. So before we start that and before I give the ground rules, can I have a show of hands of people who are here who would like to speak during oral communication about the storm and the storm damage? Okay, great. Is there anyone here to speak under oral communication that doesn't have to do with the storm? In other words, some other subject matter. Okay, well, you can go first, so why don't you come up? And so oral communication, while you're coming to the here are the basic ground rules. The public shall have the opportunity at every regularly scheduled meeting to be heard under oral communication on matters not appearing on the agenda. Oral communication shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to city business to appear before the council, state their problem without debate, and the matter shall be referred to the proper agency through the office of the mayor. The resident must be notified by the office of the mayor in writing within a 2-week period relative to the disposition of the same, and a copy shall be forwarded to the City Council. Persons speaking under oral communication shall be limited to 3 minutes each. Council President shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. So, having said that, go ahead and state your name and address, please.
My name is Alice Morris.
Could you speak right into the microphone,
My name is Alice Morris, and my
Okay.
family and I live at 3 Dooley Street in Lanesville. And thank you for letting me talk. I want to address what happened a week ago on Muncie Road in Lanesville. We're all very relieved and grateful that the incident happened without any violence and no one was physically hurt. Violence would have been horrible and a gunfight would have been unthinkable. However, I do not think the day was a complete success. There was harm caused and it could have been prevented. We know that the incident started at 11:30, and between that time and the time school first started dismissing 2 hours later, no clear plan was made to keep the children of the community safe. Because of that lack of planning, a school bus stopped 2 houses away from where there were armed guards and people trying not to have somebody shoot from a house. And there was another child who was dropped off right next to this, a few houses down, and because there was no leadership or direction from leadership, the child was told to run for it, which she did, and she was terrified of being shot in the back. Another child was, or several children were at the last second bussed from the school. They were walkers and they were bussed from Plum Cove. And because there was no leadership and no plan ahead of time, there were no parents were informed of where their children were. And I got a frantic phone call from one of my friends whose daughter was waiting for her brother, and he was missing and he hadn't come home, and she saw a bunch of cop cars and obviously would think the worst. So I feel like this was harm caused to our children and to the community. So I called the mayor's office, the police department, and the superintendent's office, and I was told that everything had to be confidential so that the man in the house was not triggered into violence via social media or the television, and that they were just following orders by not saying anything. But that's unacceptable. because the children were endangered because of the lack of leadership's ability to speak up and say, what can we say to make sure the children are safe? It's got to be confidential, but we need to say something so that the children are not in harm's way or endangered or terrified like they were. So there needs to be a reflection on the town's leadership on how it's possible that nobody spoke up for the children, and going forward, a plan has to be made that addresses future incidences like this. Hopefully, nothing will happen, but we all know it's possible, and it has to keep in mind all school, including private schools and preschools, middle school, high school, and all the elementary schools, if any are involved. So thank you for your time. It does not negate the fact that everything went without violence, and we're all happy about that, but I feel like this is Gloucester and we can do a better job.
Thank you. Can you leave a copy of that with the clerk? Thank you. Okay, anybody else other than the storm issue? Okay, before we start that, let me just say a couple of things. First of all, just to recount the facts, we had a big storm on January 4th, which had a lot going on, including a super high tide, as was our custom. As is our requirement, there was no city street parking in order to facilitate snow plowing, and as is our custom, we, the city, made available parking lots at the public schools. Cars were parked in those lots, and the cars that were parked at the lower lot of the parking of the high school, between the high school and Newell Stadium, were subject to an exceptionally high tide, which flooded over the banks of the canal, flooded Newell Stadium and the parking lot, damaging many cars. So that was the factual issue. As a result of the damage and the confusion and the trauma to residents, Councillor O'Hara requested, and Councillor Memhard and Nolan requested under the charter a special meeting of the City Council. We discussed that and decided that perhaps the best forum would be to include it on this meeting, our regularly scheduled meeting, with the allowance during oral communication of people with specific issues to address the council and thus the administration. So as you heard, our procedures are, please state your name, address, and the issue that you wish to be addressed, and the administration will look into that and give you an answer. The council will follow up with the administration on the various requests and the issues that we have. So, and I'm going to try and stick to the 3-minute mark. I'm not going to be an ogre about it, but we do have a lot of people who want to talk, so please be mindful of the 3-minute mark, and I'll give you a discrete signal as when to stop, and then if it goes on too long, it won't be so discreet. So with that, Councillor O'Hara, do you have anything you'd like to comment on before we start?
Please, thank you. I just want to thank Councillor Memhard and Nolan for supporting this. This, we feel, is a very important issue. Obviously, the people who parked in the lot under the direction of the city were exposed to the flooding of January 4th. We're here to listen to you. Please, for those who are uncomfortable, don't be. We want to hear everything that you have to say. I'm very thankful to Councillor Lundberg for being so open to listening to everyone speak, so please don't be bashful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. And Councillor Cox, you wish to say something?
Yes. I think there's some confusion as to what this is going to produce, because even though 3 councillors requested this, all of us are concerned about this, but it didn't warrant a special meeting because it's really out of our hands. And oral communication is where people can address us and the administration, but we don't actually debate or talk about the issues that are brought to us as oral communication. So there was some questions addressed to me about what the process was going to be tonight by someone that wanted to speak, and they thought that there was going to be some dialogue. So I just want to be clear that there is not going to be any dialogue during this conversation. There's not going to be any response because that's standard oral communications procedure. But also want to also communicate that all of us are deeply impacted by what happened at the high school. And we all would like to see a better process and system. It's not just the three that were stated this evening.
Sure, just to correct slightly, there will be a response. It just won't, we're not going to have a debate about it here during our meeting. There will be a response to everyone who has a complaint, an issue that hasn't been resolved in their mind. There will be a response to that. And as Councilor Cox correctly pointed out, at the end of the day, it is the administration of the city and not the city council that needs to make the decision about things like, does the insurance policy apply, and was the warning proper, and all that kind of stuff. We will certainly have input, and we'll be conversant with them, but at the end of the day, it's the administration's responsibility. So, having said that, we will open up the oral communication part to people who wish to address the council on issues relating to the January 4th storm and the ensuing damage. And if you would mind just lining up over here behind the lectern, this is the lectern that you will use to speak. And if everybody who wishes to speak could just form a line down that side of the auditorium, and we will begin. So don't be bashful. And as Councilor O'Hara said, you know, don't be nervous about speaking before the City Council. We all have the same feelings that you do about the storm and trying to fix it and all that kind of stuff. So this is just we just want to get as much information out into the public as we can. So whoever would like to be first, please welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Kathy Reardon. I'm a resident at 13 Hampton Street in Gloucester. I'm a visiting nurse with Leahy Health at Home. I kind of just I'd like to go back a little bit to the day of the storm, which of course we were all kind of panicked at. But per usual, in that neighborhood, we are very limited for parking. We have homes in the neighborhood that don't have driveways. We have homes in the neighborhood that might have a driveway, but maybe for a single car. So we are extremely dependent on the public parking when there is a parking ban. On the day of, what was the date again of the storm? January 4th, we had the usual, parking ban. It was at 8 o'clock that night, I believe. We all got our cars off the road. And, we're, watching the storm. I actually was on call that day, and I got a call, and I had to go out and do a visit in the middle of the storm. My husband said, I don't want you driving. We had all three cars, my husband's, my daughter's, and my own, down at the high school. And my husband said, I will drive you, I don't want you driving in the storm. So we went down to the high school, shoveled ourselves out, as always, and left for Manchester, where I had to do an emergency visit. My daughter texted us maybe it was a half hour or so later and said, Mom, the whole high school is underwater. And the cars, you can't even see the cars. So my husband and I were like, oh my God. So it happened very quickly. What happened? We went and drove, and you could not even get through Centennial Ave. The water had gone from the high school football field out into Centennial Ave, up Lloyd Street, and halfway up Gaffney Street, so it was quite extensive. When we got to the high school, when we drove around the other side, we couldn't even see the cars. You really could not see the cars. It was really, took your breath away. It was really unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it, and the only thing I could think of was, thank God nobody was hurt. Thank God nobody was out being silly and walking their dog, or, because a lot of people ambulate around that area. And I thought to myself, too, I was very lucky that we got out of there when we did, because it was probably a matter of minutes before that tidal wave came over, or whatever it was. So the other thing I want to say, that was that day, which was very it was traumatic. Everyone was like, well, what are we going to do? What are we doing? What are we going to do? Oh, my gosh. Of course, you couldn't get near the high school at that time because of, the storm and the flooding. The next day, we had 70 residents, of my particular neighborhood, that Centennial Ave, Hampton Hill area that just is inner city and just doesn't have a lot of parking. And everyone was down there, it was so cold, you couldn't even, you were trying to talk and your lips were freezing to death. And when we got down there, the cars would literally look like they were in a igloo. It almost looked like there was your car and they were, formed in this igloo. And nobody really knew what was going on. Everyone's like, well, what do we do? How are we going to fix it? Or what do we do? Nobody had a clue. So there was no communication on, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let's figure out what we're going to do and, help. And that was the thing that kind of threw me back a little bit, because I've always felt this city to be very open and very compassionate when things happen. So we were stuck. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world because no one was hurt, and that was the most important thing. But you did have 70 families with extreme financial hardship because, I lost my car, which was my livelihood. I'm now driving a rental car, which is fine. My daughter lost her car. We had neighbors that, lost 3 cars, families that lost, cars. And even though it's a car, it is your livelihood. It is how you get your kids to and from school, how to get your kids to and from sports, how you get yourself to and from work. For me, I need a car because I'm out on the road doing medical visits. So that to me was kind of I was just a little taken back that nobody was there to advise us what to do. That was, I think, my main disappointment. Was that we're all out there freezing our buns off and nobody knows what to do.
Right.
And very thankful that nobody was hurt. Our cars were dead, but no physical being was hurt. But in the long run, after everything kind of settled down, you realize that the hardship that it put on families, because a lot of families didn't have the particular insurance that they might need for that thing that nobody ever thought would happen, correct? People lost their cars, people lost their transportation and lost their ability to work. You have it's a big deal. It was a big deal. But so that was my main thing, is that, where was our support system?
Fair enough.
So that's
We
it.
appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Kathy, and this is for everybody, can you let us know what your loss was?
I
So that
will.
way we can put it on the record also, please?
Certainly, thank you. Oh, no, I'd have to talk to Ted.
Yeah, what was your loss? How many cars or?
2 cars. 2 cars in the home, yep.
Jamie?
Can you project, Kathy? Could you project, and everyone, as Council LeBlanc, do you have a ballpark as far as how much out of pocket?
I'd have to, my husband is kind of dealing with that, so I'd have to talk to him.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. I will let you know, though.
Thank you. Okay, next, name and address, please.
My name is Joel Emerson. I live at 50 Summer Street. Emerson. You're welcome. 50 Summer Street. I'm a new, proud, first-time homeowner here in Gloucester. My husband and I live with a roommate. We, 2 of the 3 of our cars were lost to the storm. We followed protocol, as was mentioned, and parked down at the high school 2 blocks away. In terms of loss, we've been fighting back and forth with the insurance company, our roommate and I. And as of today, just today, insurance came to our house and wrote us a payoff after a back and forth for the past 2 weeks. Luckily, I looked online and I realized that you don't have to accept the first payout option and that you should try to negotiate. I didn't know that. I'm a high school teacher who makes a high school teacher's wage, and so I don't have a law background or anything, but I am glad for the internet because it got us a fairer payout than we would have had on first offer. I want to say a place is a community to the extent that it cares for its most vulnerable. And I think in light of this storm, the most vulnerable people from January 4th, besides for those who are homeless, who are even more vulnerable, are those who lost, as Kathy mentioned, a significant portion of their wealth. I had just paid off my 2015 Subaru Impreza in July. Now I'm driving a 2008 Subaru Impreza. My roommate also just purchased a car. It was leased, not leased rather, it was on loan, so he only received a little bit on top of what the loan was paid off. He's getting married in 2 months and moving. So we're under financial duress. I think it's important for the city to know that for those who follow protocol and direction, there should be some sort of support system beyond platitudes. It's great that we're listening to each other. Listening is important, but I also go to therapy, and this is more important than therapy because ultimately we would expect results from the talk rather than just kind of a emotional catharsis. So on behalf of my neighbors, some of whom are working right now at Market Basket and they can't come here, on behalf of my roommate who's working overtime, I'm lucky enough to be able to just work one job. I want the city to know that we expect great things from it for those of us who find ourselves in need after the result of this storm. So thank you very much for your time. That was 3 minutes and 4 seconds on the record. You're welcome.
My name is Barry Smaralia. I live at 7 Lloyd Street in Gloucester, and I am an owner of just one car, and it was parked as I was advised to park over in the school lot, which is across the street from Lloyd Street. I thought I was doing the correct thing, basically what the town had said to do. As it turns out, there were a couple of cars that didn't move, and they were not ticketed or towed, and they suffered no damage, but my car was completely totaled. And I called AAA as she mentioned that we didn't know what to do, so I called AAA to tow the car, and they didn't come. Tally's took it, and so it's up at Tally's in the salvage yard. I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm basically on foot now, so I'm walking everywhere I can, and if I want to get something to eat, then I have to go to like the open door. My estimate, I suppose, for the one car was I just put in $3,500 worth of repairs into it, and it had some intrinsic value. It had a complete value to me because it was my only transportation. So that's basically what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kelly Reardon, and I live at 13 Hampton Street. My mom spoke earlier. I think my biggest problem with everything that's going on is that, like my mom said, we don't have driveways. I've lived in that neighborhood my whole life, and I'm 40 years old. So for the past 40 years, myself, when I've had a car, my parents, we've always parked at Gloucester High School in that lot. I just feel like with how bad the storm was, that there should have been some sort of warning put out to residents. I have kids that go to school, and we get phone calls all the time that come in from the school system that says, there's a half a day tomorrow, or, make sure you pick up your kids. There's a meeting at, veterans at noontime for whatever. I just don't understand why there was no warning put out to residents saying, maybe you should find an alternate place to park. There are these crazy high tide warnings, and place is subject to flooding. Maybe you should move your car. I mean, I know that maybe to some people that's common sense. I wasn't sitting in front of the TV watching the weather thing. I was playing games with my 10-year-old son. I don't sit and listen to the weather. I didn't think that I had to do that. I would have hoped that there would have been something put out by the city to tell us that maybe we should park somewhere else. And had they said that, then anybody that parked there, so be it, that's your fault. But I'm having a hard time grasping that there was nothing said to people or saying, people that park there, Stage Fort Park is open, or O'Malley School is open, or, something. But when you live across the street, you're not going to park at O'Malley School, so you have to walk home 2 miles. It just doesn't make sense. We've always parked there. I really don't understand why the city didn't put something out. And for me, I had a car that I had saved my money for 2 years that I just bought last year. I bought it outright, and I put basic insurance on it. So my car was a 100% loss. My car is at the salvage yard. I gave it to, the guy's brother that owns, the Tally's guy's brother or son or someone that has the salvage yard up there. I just told them to keep it. I didn't have AAA, my parents did, so my car got towed up there. But for someone, and I know I'm not the only one that happened to, but I now have nothing, and I have to start fresh from zero. And I'm a single mom. I work at the hospital, at a doctor's office. I don't have a ton of money, and I'm carless now. Thank God that my dad's car didn't get ruined, and I now have him carting my kids from all over hell's creation. I have a 10-year-old disabled son that goes to school at the consortium in Peabody. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to pick him up if I get a call from the school saying he's sick. If anybody has any ideas on how I'm supposed to do that, I don't know. But I just really think that there needs to be something put in place for a warning for residents. Like I said, you guys can put the city can put phone calls out for a lot of stuff. There's no reason whatsoever why, if something like that is even possible in the forecast, that something shouldn't have been said to people. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Yes, Jamie.
Could I? Kelly? How much would you project your car value as being?
I paid $3,600 for my car last January.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Maria Carroll. I live at 3 Commonwealth Ave. I'm a junior at Gloucester High School, actually, and me and my mother's car were both parked at, in the parking lot. We had just moved there in the beginning of November, so this was our first parking ban where we had to park somewhere else. We were advised that the parking place for anyone that didn't have off-street parking would be at the high school. So obviously the flood happened, and what kind of got us is that we weren't even told by the city or by anyone that, all the cars in the parking lot were underwater. I had to see that through social media. It was all over social media accounts. People kind of, like other kids who weren't affected, were just making a joke out of it, like our school's the new Atlantis. So by the time we had figured it out, we called over my dad and to see if he could bring us over to see if there was anything that we could do to get our cars out. I just saved all summer long. It was my first car. I bought it in the beginning of October, so I've had it roughly for 3 months. I bought it for $2,000. So when we went down on the 4th, the day of the storm, after the flooding had kind of gone down a little bit, and the cars were just completely submerged in water. We couldn't even go to the parking lot. There was absolutely nothing we can do. So I didn't have full coverage on my car because I have to pay for my insurance myself. And I work at the Beauport Hotel, and insurance is a lot as it is, so I couldn't pay for full coverage. My mom did have full coverage on her car though, so she will be getting her loans being paid off, but she's still not even given she's not even being given the worth of the car. So and then after the flooding, we knew we had to get our cars towed out of the parking lot. Obviously, my grandmother has AAA, and she called for us, and we were having our cars towed to her house where they could be stored without any costs. Tally's was getting a bunch of calls that day, obviously having to get all of the cars out of the parking lot. So they didn't directly tow our cars to my grandmother's house. They were all brought to the salvage yard at Tally's. I called my grandmother later the next day and said, hey, are the cars there, just to make sure? She said, no, they never showed up. So we called Tally's, and they said that they were bringing all the cars to the lot until things kind of settled down and they were able to bring the cars to their respective places. My dad called themselves, made sure everything would be settled. The cars were never towed to my grandmother's house. Today I actually had to go and get the plates off my old car and found out that although I wasn't being charged for storage necessarily, I could not take my car and try to sell it to the junkyard to get at least some money for it, because otherwise I would be charged $900 for storing my car there, even though that's not where it was supposed to go in the first place. And we had already said, they had told us that they would tow it to where it would be, where we wouldn't be charged. So I pretty much had to hand over my title, otherwise I couldn't have my plates. So that was pretty much it. So yeah, my car was totaled at $2,000. I just bought it in the beginning of October. My mom's was about 15 grand. She still had a $9,000 loan. Her insurance company is giving her 10 grand, even though the car is valued at 15 grand. So she's actually fighting with the insurance company trying to get a higher number, but yeah, that's it. Thank you.
My name is Julie Cleveland. I live at 9 Foster Street, apartment 1. And I have some photos that I'd like to hand out. First of all, I would like to say that I am heartbroken for the losses of the other people in this room. And this is the first time I have actually felt supported by seeing other people. I have no idea who the other 70-odd people are, and it's making me feel stronger hearing your stories. It's making me feel stronger knowing that I can speak to all of you. I will read my prepared remarks. The story I'm about to tell you is painful for me to recount. I cried while writing this. I got angry as I had to relive these events all over again, which has only made it harder seeing pictures and news stories with my car all over the place, as you can see from the top picture of those that I have just shared with you tonight. That's my Corolla. But I think it's important for you to hear my story. I make my living teaching people how to play the piano. I love what I do, and I am so lucky for what I do, but I don't own a house, I don't own a condo, I rent a one-bedroom apartment, and like many others, my car was the only thing that I owned. I had just finished paying off the car. It took me 6 years. It was the first really good car I ever bought. I remember the lady at the bank saying, "Congratulations," when I made my final payment. It was a major accomplishment for me. And I have so many memories in the car, especially with my mom driving around the Cape, and my students always say, "Miss Julie and her little red car." My car was also the family car. My mom, who's 84, no longer drives and needs rides to her medical appointments, to get groceries, to go to the pharmacy, etc. A car is more than just a thing. It holds personal belongings, memories, and a sense of freedom. I was done teaching 7:15 Wednesday night. I had just enough time to get to the store, get some groceries for my mom, drop them off at Sheedy, and make it to the lot by 8. And I knew the deadline because I always check the parking ban info on the city website. And I always park my car at the Gloucester High School parking lot in the front, because it's the shortest walk back to my place. I put my windshield wipers up so they wouldn't be buried in the snow Friday morning. On Thursday afternoon, around 1:30, my upstairs neighbor texted me, "Did you know our cars are under 4 feet of water?" My heart started racing. I couldn't believe it. I got on Facebook and I asked if anyone could confirm this. I texted my brother. He couldn't believe it either, but within seconds, he texted me a black and white picture of cars in the lot submerged in water. And later, I found out that one of the cars in the picture was mine, and that's picture 2. Then it hit me all at once. I knew all the cars were flooded. You could see it. The cars were underwater. They were covered in snow. And then I started to cry. My car was gone right in front of my eyes, and there was nothing I could do. I cried for hours, saying out loud, no, it took me so long to pay this off. Alone in my apartment, I made it through the night, staying connected with friends via Facebook, and I saw the now iconic black and white picture that was seen by thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I've always had 2 stuffed bears who sit in the back window of my car. One is Angel Bear and one is Peace Bear, and they've been my good luck charm in the car. And that night, Thursday night, I woke up and I started crying because I had dreamt that they were wet and cold in the car, or maybe not even in the car anymore, that somehow the windows were open and they had floated away. On Friday, I texted my brother, who was already down at the lot, to tell him I was leaving, and he replied, "Don't bother to bring the shovel." When I got down to my car, other owners were there, also in shock. One man said to me, "I didn't lose just my car, I lost my 2 daughters' car as well." Another guy said he had just bought his car for $22,000. A woman next to him said, "This is my parents' car. They're retired, and this was the last car that they were going to buy." As soon as I got into my car, I grabbed my 2 bears, which were bone dry. I stuffed one in each pocket. I was relieved. We went through the icy water really fast, getting whatever we could. My brother opened the glove compartment, and water spilled out. There was no one at the scene to help us that I could see, no one from the city, the police, or the fire department. It was just a Talley's tow truck and a handful of car owners. I was very worried about what to do. The new parking ban ended at noon. It was past that, and there was no way I could get my car out. See picture 3. On Saturday, the Boston Globe had an article with a picture taken by a drone of the lot. And there was my car with the wipers up and my brother standing next to it, and he was no doubt texting me at the time to say, "Don't bother with the shovel." And that's picture 4. Later that morning, he called. He'd just gone by the lot, and he said that none of the cars were there. And I panicked. Where was my car? I mean, there was no information. I was checking Facebook constantly and the mayor's page, and there was just nothing. And I didn't know who else was in the flood. So I spent the weekend, like I'm sure everyone else, worrying, angry. I was traumatized, crying, of course. Although I checked frequently, there was still nothing posted, which spoke directly to the owners. I did see trash pickup updates, but I didn't see anything talking to us. Sunday, I did get the info that I needed through a friend, and it was buried in a thread on Facebook. I learned that my car was up at Blackburn Circle and that a public statement was coming out on Monday. See picture 5. So first thing Monday morning, I went to the mayor's page looking for the public statement. But the first post on the mayor's page was a transcript of Oprah Winfrey's speech at the Golden Globes from the night before. It hurt me, it upset me because it was thoughtless. And I am certain this was not the intention of our mayor. But sharing Oprah's speech first thing Monday morning was not as important as addressing the 70-odd car owners who had just lost their cars in a flood, who, like me, may have had lots of unanswered questions and were wondering what was next. I did read the public statement that was released later that day, and the second paragraph felt like a punch in the stomach. That parking at that lot was strictly optional and we were free to make other arrangements. Picture 6. What other arrangements? I mean, had I known there was any risk at parking at that lot, I would have heeded the warning. I was never made aware of any risk parking there. I didn't tell this story today to get money from the city. I told it because I am disappointed. I had hoped for more compassion during those first 4 days from our elected officials, but sadly during that time I felt more compassion talking with a young man from Kentucky at my insurance company and from my friends and neighbors and church community than I did from the city. It was a harrowing 4 days for me, and the city should have done better for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have a copy for the clerk, that would be great. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. Jamie?
Julie, would you mind telling us what the value of your car may have been, please?
Well, I haven't called the claim people back yet because I'm not good at negotiating either, and I'm researching on Google. I paid $18,000 for it 6 years ago, and I think I'm going to get about $5,000.
Thank you.
And we're glad that the Bears were okay, really. Next, please.
Good evening. My name is April Metzger, and I'm relatively new to Gloucester. I moved here in October. I live on Centennial Ave, 3 Centennial Ave. I rent a little apartment there. And I was told numerous times when I rented the apartment, what do we do, where do we go when there's a parking ban? And I was told by everybody to go to the high school. So in turn, that's what I did. And anyways, my vehicle was purchased. I lost my mother, and she had a small estate, and I was able to use that money to purchase my first brand new vehicle. And it was my little Volkswagen Beetle, and I've had many, but this was my first new one. And I took extremely good care of it, and I was very, very happy with my car. And I was extremely disappointed when this happened. It was devastating. I certainly cannot buy, and never can buy another new car. I don't make that much money. Right now I'm renting a car that, you know, is I'm sure people who've rented cars realize it's not fun. You want your own car. And I'll just never be able to replace it. And that's really about what I have to say. I understand how people are feeling because it is a small town, it is a small community. I was actually raised in Topsfield, and I know small communities and small town, what have you, camaraderie. I can't even say it. I'm sorry. I'm not good at talking in front of people, but it was a little undaunting, to say the least. I mean, I did finally find my car. I was able to call the police department, non-emergency number, to find out where it was. After, you know, I went down to see it, and nothing would work. It was completely frozen. The battery was dead. I couldn't even get it open. I finally got it open. It just, you know, and I did have things in it. I had papers that I still had in the trunk of my car from moving that I had just stored there, some clothes and things like that are gone. That's really all I have to say.
Go ahead, Jamie.
April? Yes. Would you mind disclosing what your loss was?
Well, it was, I paid $25,000 for the car, and I've received the claim that my insurance is giving me is $15,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry for your loss.
Hi, I'm Liz Duff. I live on high ground on 2 Cross Street in Gloucester. I'm lucky I'm not one of the people that was parking in the lot. But I work for Mass Audubon. In the past several years, we've been doing vulnerability assessments with the students at the high school. In some of our assessments, we'd look at sea level rise or coastal flooding, and we knew for sure that that, the football field was vulnerable and all the way over to Commonwealth Ave. And of course, like any of you, we didn't know that this storm would have such high flooding, but I think the question for us all is how do we prevent this in the future? Is there a better strategy for the city in terms of where people will be guided to park, such as in places with high ground, so that we don't have to listen to so many people suffering in the future, because we do expect more extreme events and more, sea level rise. So we would expect this to be happening more often. So it's a wake-up call, and let's listen to that and wake up. And I also, through social media, know there's been some people that started a GoFundMe page. And so any of us that are lucky enough to not be impacted, it'd be great to show support. If the city itself can't do it personally, we can help out these families. I would have hated to lose one car, and I'm hearing about 2 or 3 cars that families are losing. So if there's a way to share that information so that the people who have suffered losses can get supported, that'd be great.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wish to speak about the damage from the storm? Well, let me just say thank you very much for coming and speaking to the City Council tonight. We really appreciate that. It's not an easy thing to do. And, normally under these circumstances in the oral communication, the issues brought forth go to the mayor, and there's a response within 2 weeks. The City Council will take it upon itself to work with the mayor's office to see what, if any, steps we can take to address these issues. But there will be an answer, even if the answer is, sorry, we've done everything we can do, but we're going to do what we can do in terms of the specific circumstances. And we also get the message about communication and forewarning and all that stuff. So we'll work on all that. So with that, anybody else have anything to quickly say before we move on?
I think one of the most important things for us to kind of think about is when there's any type of a disaster, or not that this was like a, hurricane. I mean, like a Hurricane Maria or anything. But I think, like we're talking about today, communication is so huge. And I think one of the most important things that people are feeling is not even so much that there was no communication quite before, but there was no communication after. And I think that's what, I think as a city and as a community, I think that's what we really have to look at. That there was no communication with the people that were affected by this issue. Okay, thank you.
And that is something we can do something about. Okay, next item of business, Madam Clerk.
Next item is the presentation of the City of Gloucester Recreational Marijuana Task Force.
Thank you. Just for the audience's information, so as everyone knows, 2 years ago the voters in the Commonwealth legalized recreational marijuana. Part of the process is the cities and towns are needing to establish their rules and regulations about zoning and so forth. The City of Gloucester has convened a task force made up of department heads, some of whom will speak tonight. We are not anywhere near the point of recommending zoning changes or any other legislation. We have asked the task force to please give us an update. As many of you know, the original deadline for the acceptance, and by the way, the licenses to run retail marijuana establishments are state licenses, and the deadline for those licenses is June 1st. The City of Gloucester, like many cities, passed a moratorium through the end of December to give us some time to work through these various issues, some of which you'll hear about tonight. So tonight is just a report from the task force. We're not going to be having a public hearing on any legislation at all. We just wanted to get a good idea and the citizens to get a good idea where things stand on the issue of the retail establishment. So, Mr. Destino, I guess you're going to represent the task force right now?
Well, I'm going to lead it off, Mr. President. Thank you. My name is Jim Destino, Councillors from the I work in the Mayor's office. I'm kind of pinch hitting tonight for our chairman of the Recreational Task Force, who is our health director, Karen Carroll. She's under the weather tonight, so I'm filling in. Just a little history. So I guess the task force was formed a little over a year ago. We've had a number of meetings. We've been really engaged on this issue, trying to set the city up the best possible way for not only the arrival of recreational marijuana in our community as it was voted back in November of 16, but to zone it correctly, to discuss everything from youth access and talking about exploring ballot questions. A couple of months ago, Madam Chair broke us into a couple of subcommittees, and you're going to hear from the chairs of those subcommittees tonight. They're going to do short presentations, and then we will open it up to questions, Mr. President. So let me just give you a little about the three committees. The first committee is the Local Control Option Committee. General Counsel Chip Payson is the chair of that group, and that group was put together to explore ballot questions, timeline, communications with the City Council. That committee was made up of Chip, myself, Councilor Val Gilman, Chris Sicaranza, and City Clerk Joanne Sinos. The second group was chaired by our Community Development Director, Jill Cahill, and that was to explore the potential locations for retail zoning controls to the extent allowed by law, time, place, and manner, demographic, market, and data. That group was made up of Jill, myself, Greg Catamatore, Bill Sanborn, and Chief John McCarthy. And the last group, which was chaired by Karen Carroll, but John McCarthy will be sitting in doing the presentation tonight, is to discuss youth access, local regs, enforcement and staffing, training, food, OUIs, education and prevention. That group was made up by Karen, Chief McCarthy, Joan Whitney, and two school committee members, Melissa Texera and Kathy Clancy. So, Mr. President, I'll introduce Chip Payson to do the first presentation, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Destino. Mr. Payson, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, members of the City Council, Chip Payson, General Counsel. As Jim mentioned, I chair the Local Control Options Subcommittee. While the recreational marijuana laws slowly become clearer over the past year, it still remains fluid and murky, unfortunately. To date, the Cannabis Control Commission, the CCC, has been formed and has recently promulgated draft regulations. Municipalities may regulate the time, place, and manner of recreational marijuana establishments, but not their licensing. That's controlled by the CCC. According to the law, municipalities may not pass ordinances or bylaws that are unreasonably impracticable. Beginning on April 1st, 2018, the CCC will begin taking applications for recreational marijuana establishments in communities. Once a complete application is filed with the CCC will notify the municipality. The municipality then has 60 days to determine whether the applicant is or is not in compliance with any local ordinances in effect at that time. If the applicant is in compliance, the application will likely be provisionally granted. The first provisional licenses, Mr. President, as you mentioned, may be issued on June 1st of 2018. A municipality may limit the number of recreational marijuana establishments to 20% of the number of liquor licenses issued in that city or town. In Gloucester, that number is between 3 and 4. Since Gloucester voted in favor of the legalization of marijuana, in order to limit the number of recreational marijuana establishments to less than 3 or 4, or ban them altogether, the city would need to put the question on the ballot for popular vote. According to the law, in order to go on the ballot, the question must contain the draft ordinance language, and it must first be voted on by the City Council and approved by the mayor. That's in statute. The legal department will prepare a concise summary of the ordinance and the language of the ordinance itself. This is if the council decides to go with the ballot measure. The ballot question would consist of the following question: shall Gloucester adopt the following ordinance? Then it'll include a summary and the draft ordinance language. If the City Council decides against putting a measure on the ballot, the city will need to craft and pass ordinances that address, among other things, the number of establishments allowed, the special permit process, the location of establishments, etc. Absent a ban, the ordinances cannot prohibit a medical marijuana dispensary that was pre-certified by the Department of Public Health prior to July 1, 2017, from converting into recreational marijuana establishment. Given all this, there's several matters that the City Council should consider. 1, whether to put the question of a ban of all recreational marijuana establishments in the city on the ballot. 2, whether to put the question of limiting the number of recreational marijuana establishments in the city to less than 3 or 4. 3, whether to pass an ordinance that limits the numbers of recreational marijuana establishments to 3 or 4 or more. Remember, 20% of the liquor licenses comes out to be between 3 and 4. Anything less than that number has to go on the ballot. Anything more than that number, and the City Council, as a matter of right, can set the number. Number 4, the Council should consider ordinances regarding recreational marijuana establishments, cultivation, manufacturing, and research and testing facilities. There's multiple licenses that can be acquired. It's not just for retail establishments to sell, it's for cultivation, manufacturing, research and testing, etc. And finally, number 5, the City Council must vote to accept the local sales tax option of 3% sales tax on marijuana retailers in order for it to take effect, and that's in the statute. I'll touch just very briefly on timing. If the Council decides to place a question on the ballot question would need to be approved at least 35 days prior to a special election and at least 60 days prior to the general election in November. As you will recall, and as was mentioned, on September 26, 2017, the City Council passed a zoning moratorium until December 31st, 2018. The intent behind that moratorium was, in my opinion, twofold. First, it allowed time for the dust to settle around the new law and for there to be analyses done of it. Second, and equally important, it allowed time for the city to consider its options and act accordingly. It's important to note, however, that the language in the moratorium states that it shall be in effect, the moratorium shall be in effect through December 31st, 2018, or 6 months from the date that final regulations are issued by the CCC. As I mentioned previously, the CCC has already issued draft regulations, and it's reasonable to expect that final regulations will be issued by March 15th, 2018. If that's the case, the zoning moratorium could expire on September 15th, 2018, not December 31st, 2018. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the next speaker, and I'll be happy to answer questions, any questions you may have after the presentations.
Thank you, Chip. We'll wait till all the speakers have spoken before questions from councilors. So, Jill, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. And through you to the councilors. I'm Jill Cahill. I'm the Community Development Director. As Jim pointed out who our team was, and I want to point out that Greg Catamatori is here, our Planning Director, so he can help answer questions if they're specific to zoning ordinances because of his in-depth knowledge. Our subcommittee was tasked with exploring potential locations for adult use recreational marijuana. We took into consideration many things, but priority was given to public safety, capacity, traffic, and potential economic benefits. We are, at this point, exploring recommendations that would involve introducing a zoning ordinance that would take the form of an overlay district and would allow for recreational adult use marijuana sales in commercial districts and business parks throughout the city. The final language in that ordinance would include additional requirements that take into account considerations for things like parcel size, parking, etc. We would also like to include a 500-foot setback from private or public schools, daycares, or any facility in which minors commonly congregate. Also a 500 setback between each recreational marijuana retail facility. And for consistency's sake, we would like to include changes to the current zoning related to medicinal marijuana to make them consistent with this, and also change them from 1,500 feet from each other to 500 feet from each other. To give you a sense of some of the locations, so we have taken a look at that on a map. The task force has seen it, has been playing with that. Some potential locations that we would consider for adult use marijuana retail would be Shaw's Plaza on Railroad Ave, Stop and Shop Plaza, Essex Avenue near the Mobile Mart, that area, Gloucester Crossing, and Blackburn Business Park. And it's important to point out that this is not a comprehensive list of all the potential locations, but just some examples to hopefully give you guys some more comfort with the concept. And that's us.
Welcome, Chief. Thank you.
Evening, Mr. President, members of the City Council. John McCarthy from the Police Department. And as Mr. Destino told you, the subcommittee I was on was dealing with health and safety, public safety issues. Some of the issues that we looked at, one, as was mentioned, it's going to increase the operating under the influence of drugs and the detection of same. One of the things that the subcommittee took up was the only accurate detection for operating under the influence of drugs are drug recognition experts. We have none currently on the police department. It's a very costly, intense training. We're hoping that that is one of the things that this committee identified in a letter to the CCC as being an unfunded mandate, and asking that they take this into consideration when they start handing out the state tax money. I talked to state police within the last week. They've seen already, without the retail sales, but with it being legal, an uptick of OUI drugs. The officer that's in Gloucester from the state police said he's doing 2 to 3 a week now. One of the problems with everything that's going on with the CCC and the state is there is no threshold of THC level that has been established. So that's something that is going to have to be looked at in the future by the state. Even with the drug recognition expert, there's going to have to be legislation put forth dealing with what you have now under the influence of liquor. You have an implied consent law that you, when you get your license, you implied that you will take the breathalyzer. There is no implied consent law for the drug recognition expert. So that's one of the things that our legislature is going to have to look into, enacting some type of a law that will deal with that. We're going to have to look at public consumption laws, which are usually a city ordinance. Much similar to, we have no drinking in public. Even though there's no smoking of marijuana in public, we're going to have to deal with edibles and all the different forms of marijuana, the different ways that people are going to be able to use the drug. We are going to have to deal with advertising, hopefully limiting any major advertising in the area of school activities or youth activities or any sporting events, that type of thing. We're going to have to look at hours of operation, much like we do with liquor stores now. And that may be handled by the CCC, and it may end up being a city ordinance. Board of Health staff is going to need additional training because of the edibles. You're going to find that much like we have, it's been discussed through the state, much like we have one-day liquor license, you may see marijuana involved into something on that idea. There's going to need to be compliance checks, much like we do with alcohol now, through the Board of Health, through grants through the Board of Health. Any retail establishments that may open up. We do stings with the youth in our liquor stores and our bars now, and we would advocate to do much the same, similar type of things if, in fact, retail marijuana came to Gloucester. And last but not least, the committee has sent the letter to the CCC asking for the funding that goes along with that, and hopefully to be able to get the training that's necessary for our department, the Board of Health, and any other city agency that may need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
So, Mr. President, those are the facts as we know them today. And anybody who's been following this issue knows that they change constantly. Those of us who attended the MMA conference went to, some of us went to the workshop on, the marijuana. It was jam-packed with folks who were, just dying to hear what there's a member of the CCC, member from the AG's office, and an attorney from Copeland and Page who was there to outline, and answer some of the questions of folks. I think that workshop probably could have gone on all day. It really didn't. It wasn't long enough. So as this task force was put together to make a recommendation to the mayor and to the city council going forward on how marijuana, what it was going to look like in the city after the people voted for it. As we crystallize those recommendations to you, it continues to evolve. So everything you've heard today is what we know to date, and things will change. As you heard Chip say, CCC is coming out with their regulations March 15th. There could be new, changes to that, and we'll, continue to evolve and continue to, take up these issues. And I do want to take a moment, if I could, Mr. President, to thank the members of that committee because they worked very hard. They've been very heated meetings at times. We don't all agree on everything, and it's been quite a lively group. But I think we're doing good work. I think maybe Councilor Gilman would attest that the people that we had someone from the MMA come to us and have a little workshop here. And he mentioned at the conference this weekend that Gloucester's as far along as any community in trying to deal with this issue. So I think we're doing our best, but at this point, it's not done yet. So we'll continue our work, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Destino. So I would say to the councilors, Councilor Gilman has put in an awful lot of time on this, and can always resource her, but because we have the most of the committee here, do we have any councilor questions for the committee? We'll start with you, Councilor Holgram.
This is probably the best address to Mr. Destino. If you wouldn't mind coming back up, thank you. And thank you very much to all the members of the task force. I really appreciate your hard work. So in listening to everyone who's come up here and sort of briefly touched on all of the adjustments the city is going to need to make, I'm guessing that there are going to be costs associated with us adapting to having retail facilities if this is indeed the road we go down. How feasible do you think it will be for us to recoup the municipal costs through the 3% sales tax we'll get back through, let's say, 3 or 4 retail establishments?
Well, whether or not we end up with retail sales or not in the city, there's going to be a cost either way, because it's legal in the state now. There is, as John said, there will be people traveling in Gloucester who are using it, so there's still going to be a cost to train police officers, even if we don't have retail sales. I think I've said this before in front of this group, maybe not this group, but the last council, that, you know, marijuana is still illegal by federal law. And usually the testing for marijuana is done by the FDA. In this case, the states now have, who adopt these and legalize recreational marijuana, have to do their own testing. So those facilities for testing, those facilities for writing the rules, regulating all of the, you know, the processes that go along with dealing with this new, you know, industry, need to be funded. And, you know, the state put in a tax, which is what, I think it believes 23% overall. We will get a 3% tax. It will not be, my estimation, and again, it's an estimate, will not be enough to be able to deal with, you know, the types of things that we're going to have to do it correctly. Education, training, and, you know, enforcement, inspection, all of the things that we'll have to do. I don't believe initially it will. Having said that, there are other opportunities when it comes to manufacturing, testing. If those facilities come in, I mean, the real challenge is the recreational piece when we talk about retail sales. If we're talking about some of those other facilities that are growing facilities or testing facilities, and we sign host agreements with them, where it could be a good thing for the city, where revenue, jobs, and, you know, industry comes in without the high cost of, you know, day-to-day retail operations, which we have to watch I would assume, closely.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Cox?
This is probably better for Chief McCarthy. It is my understanding that banks will not touch these businesses because they are FDIC insured, which is federal. So banks will not work with marijuana retail or growing facilities because technically, federally, they're not legal. So when we discuss zoning issues and impacts, because these are 100% cash businesses, I think we need to be very cautious of having them in downtown areas or residential areas. We obviously know they're not going to be put near a school, but it's my understanding that Colorado has seen an increase in robberies with these associated businesses because there's no books per se, because it's 100% cash. And it's...
Even the medical now, the
evidence, I guess?
17 facilities in the state of Mass, because of the recent federal intervention, shall we say, or threats of intervention, have discontinued using ATMs or credit cards. So everything is 100% cash right now. It is a major safety concern. It's a concern when it comes to, just as you said, anywhere there's a lot of cash, they're vulnerable to a robbery. So yes, and I think the councilors that were here, we had a very well vetted process when medical was going in and looked at their security and that type of thing. So
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the growing facilities due to the security that we've required them to have. I don't know that we're going to be able to require that same set of security for retail shops. Everyday retail shops, we don't require those kind of things, so how can we require it on some and not others? So that's my concern.
and you probably can't, and it is a concern.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Great. Well, I'd like to thank the committee for coming and speaking to us tonight, and I'm sure we're going to have many more times together. I'd also like to acknowledge school committee members Melissa Texera and Kathy Clancy, who are also working with this committee. It's a very important part of the input is from the schools. And yes, Councilor Gilman?
I just have one brief thing I wanted to mention. So on the CCC is doing public hearings right now, and I just wanted to mention to councilors and anyone in the audience, anyone listening at home, that that there will be a public hearing on the proposed regulations coming out of the CCC on Wednesday, February 7th at North Shore Community College in Danvers, which is 1 Ferncroft Road. It's in the Math Science Building, room 119, from 2 to 5 o'clock. And it's suggested that you submit a written copy of your testimony to the Cannabis Commission. That's all one word. The 2 C's are capital, at state.ma.us, or accepted by, if you wanted to send a letter by mail, to the CCC, 101 Federal Street, 13th floor, Boston, Mass. at 02110, before 5 o'clock p.m. on February 15th on the proposed rulings. So if you want to take a look at what those regulations are, just log on to Mass.gov CCC, and you can see their minutes, you can see their regs, you can understand what is up ahead of municipalities, cities, and towns, and get a good feeling for it. And the public hearing process is to allow everyone to vet what they like about it, what they're concerned about. I will be attending that session, and I'm going to write a testimony, and our task force is going to review it and agree to it. So I just wanted to let you know that that is up ahead of us, and what I really like about this is that they're really looking for public vetting as they get into the fine-tuning of all this. So I think that it's a good process, and I just ask all of you to join that process if you want to do just that. So thank you so much, and I know we've sent out a lot of materials of recent. There's a lot of really good materials that came out from the session that Jen Holgram and I attended, as well as Joanne Sinos and Jim Destino, and the place was packed. It was standing room only, and it's really, everything I continue to read is new information, and it's very helpful because this is a dynamic process. So I just wanted to thank all of you for participating tonight and coming to present, and also to Melissa Texera and Kathy Clancy representing the school committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, next item of business.
Next item of business is the consent agenda and the unanimous consent calendar.
Okay, we have a consent agenda and one item on a unanimous consent calendar. Is there anyone who wishes to pull anything off of either of those? Nope. In that case, call for an acceptance of both as presented.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
Next item of business is the Budget and Finance Standing Committee report of January 18th.
Councillor Cox.
Good evening, all. We have one little item on the agenda for tonight, which is nice. The Budget and Finance Committee voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council approve...
Could we hold a pause for a second? I forgot to say something, and I apologize, Melissa. On the consent agenda were the confirmation of reappointments, and because they are reappointments, that is our acceptance of the consent agenda means that they are all accepted. So we won't have any more discussion about them. They are all accepted. Sorry about that. Your turn.
Can I make a request to the mayor that we turn the heat on all night long?
Okay,
on that note, the Budget and Finance Committee recommended unanimously to recommend that the City Council approve Supplemental Appropriation 2018 SA-15 in the amount of $10,000 from the General Fund Undesignated Fund Balance Free Cash account as noted to Executive Mayor Purchase of Services account as noted for the purpose of funding the restoration of cannons at Stage 4 Park. And I so move.
Second.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Basically, this is $10,000 to restore 3 of the cannons up there, 2 of which will be fireable. And I volunteer for that job.
Very good. Any questions? This is a roll call. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councillor Lundberg.
Yes?
Councillor Memhard.
Yes.
Councillor Nolan.
Yes.
Councillor O'Hara.
Yes.
Councillor Cox.
Yes.
Councillor Gilman.
Yes.
Councillor Heck.
Yes.
Councillor Holmgren.
Yes.
Councillor Blank.
Yes.
The motion for 2018 SA 15 in the amount of $10,000 from free cash to the executive mayor for the purchase of services to fund restoration of cannons at Stage 4 Park to the account specified passes on a vote of 9-0.
Thank you. That's all for Budget and Finance.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Next order of business, Madam Clerk.
Next order of business is the Ordinance and Administration Standing Committee report of January 16th.
Sure.
Mr. President, we don't have any orders of business this evening.
Thank you very much. Next order of business, Madam Clerk.
Next order of business, the Planning Development Standing Committee report of the January 17th meeting that was canceled.
Mr. President, there are no matters for council action
Very good.
under this heading.
Thank you very much. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
Next item of business is scheduled public hearings. Public hearing 2017-059, Special City Council Permit 2017-012, Schoolhouse Road number 2 and 3 and 4, map 262, lots 14 and 37, and Gloucester Crossing Road number 7, map 37, lots 4 and 5, for a special permit under the Mixed-Use Overlay District pursuant to Gloucester zoning ordinance sections 5.29, including major project, Gloucester zoning ordinance section 5.7, 5.2910, and 5.1118.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the public hearing and continue it until our meeting of February 13th, 2018. I would also like to note that Planning and Development is holding a special Planning and Development meeting Monday here, Kairos Auditorium at 5:30, for purposes of hearing additional materials involving that project. So, Madam Clerk, next item of business.
Next item of business is public hearing 2018-003, amend Gloucester zoning ordinance by adding a footnote I to section 3.2.1, inserting into the CB column, and adding the same footnote as footnote H in the CB column for section 3.2.2 regarding affordable housing.
And I will open the public hearing and continue this public hearing until our meeting of February 13th, 2018. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business, public hearing 2018-004, application of Edward C. Akerley for the storage of explosives at 200R Magnolia Ave, Assessors Map 197, Lot 17, per Mass General Law, Chapter 148, Section 13, and Gloucester Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Section 8.1, license for storing inflammables.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone to speak in favor of this application. Mr. Akerley, if you can come up and to the podium.
Good evening, councilors. My name's Edward Akerley. I have a contracting business in Conlon Road, Cape Ann Industrial Park, and we do primarily drilling, blasting, and excavation work. I'm here to get permission to store explosives on the property, which is it's at the rear of my Conlon Road lot, and the legal address is 200 rear Magnolia Avenue. But I had explosive storage in Salem, but it was eliminated because the company that I buy explosives from no longer found it feasible to for me to store explosives there, because I was the last of 5 people that used to store there, and it wasn't just financially feasible for them to keep it open just for me. So now I'm stuck with the next nearest place that I can that Austin Powder Company, who I buy explosives from. They're located in Shirley, Mass. And that takes up 4 to 5 hours of travel time every day because we have to pick it up in the morning in a locked compound and then use what we do during the day, and whatever's left over, we have to bring it back at night. So that's 2 round trips to Shirley, Mass, which is really not feasible. So, the location I have to store the explosives has been looked at by ATF, that's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and explosives. That's and also the State Fire Marshal's Office. They've been there to look at the site, and they see it as a good location for me to open up a storage area. And it would be it's a gated property, and it can't be accessed by a motor vehicle. And then once you get into the property, it'll be fenced in with a security fence. And it'll also be alarmed for the directly to the police station. So anybody that doesn't have the right combination to get in there, it will set the alarms off if they did get that far. But it's a very secure area, and it's a highly regulated industry to begin with. And I've already etched out an area to do this, and I'm just waiting to get the approval to go ahead and finish it up and get all my permits that I need to get from the federal government, the state government, and permission from the city of Gloucester.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Akerley. Just step away for a second. Is there anyone else who's speaking in favor of this application? Anyone speaking in opposition? Seeing none. Any communications, Madam Clerk?
There are none.
Any councillor questions? Mr. Nolan. Councillor Nolan, excuse me.
Ed, if you could just explain to the City Council the exact type of unit that this is, how it's not like just a self-storage unit, how it's complicated, it's alarmed, it's secure, there's no threats of anything ever being an issue for the neighborhood, and a quick description so they understand as much as I do what it actually is going to be and how it's not going to harm or affect anything in the area.
Okay, I have pictures of the magazines themselves, the storage magazines. And they're basically 5 foot by 5 foot by 5 foot cubes, and they're 1/4-inch steel plate on the outside, and on the inside there's 2 inches of oak lining on floor, ceiling, and walls. And there are 2 locks that put 5 mortise padlocks on, and they're hooded so that they can't be tampered with.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan, any others? Okay, Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. Mr. DeBregard, I see you stood up. Attaboy. Can I get you up here, please? Our fire inspector.
Let me just add one more thing. There's a code to get into the magazines, and if you don't have the right code, the alarm automatically goes off.
Adam DeBregard, Fire Inspector for Gloucester. So can you explain to us what our fire inspector is expecting from the applicant? And is he within the...
Yes, as Ed was saying, we did a site visit, a preliminary site visit with the ATF agent, and Mass State sends down their own guys also. So we went to the site. I can expand more on the site. I think you were asking, and Ed was saying, what it is he's actually has a long strip of piece of land that you can access through a gate, and it's elevated above everything else on Connellan Road. So even the slightest chance, if one of the magazines exploded, it's still the blast would be above everything else. So it is a good area in that aspect. And with what he's cleared away, he actually has rock boulders behind it, so it shields that also. And it's almost a landlocked area where there's a landlocked owned by the city on one side, more woods that he owns behind it. So it is a good isolated area, as the ATF agent and the state agent said. It's one of the more suitable and better places to store if need be. There's no residential. There's businesses, but they're closed at night also. And it's going to be gated, fenced, alarmed, the bells and whistles all through it. So it is good. As for us, or the ATF, or the state, it's annual inspections, random inspections. Anything we hear we don't like, we can go down at any time during normal operating hours or after and investigate it and look at it. We can call. No prerequisite is required or anything. We can just go. So.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything? Okay.
Councilor Cox.
While you're up here, on the off chance that something does happen, the most that would happen because of the situated land is probably a concussion, maybe windows, if that even.
Maybe, depending on how much he was actually storing at the time, and it's a set limit. He can't go above a certain amount. And because of that, there's also setbacks that he has to meet, Ed has to meet in storing it. So depending on how much he's storing, dictates how much he has to set back from the nearest building, which would be his building. And you have to understand, it's up on a cliff, 30, 40 feet up, that rock wall where a narrow... Yeah. So he's up where he's storing it. If you even drive up Connellan Road up to his place of business, there's still another 30, 40-foot rock cliff, and that's where he's storing it, up on top of there. So it's clearing anything if it goes. But shockwave might hit some windows or buildings, but I don't know as to what the damage would be, but it'd be his building.
Fabulous, thank you.
Councilor Gilman?
Inspector
Debrigard.
I'll
help you.
Thank you. You were very thorough when we vetted this through P&D, and I appreciate that. I do have a question. What are the precautions that are made when you are transporting, when customers are transporting these explosives away from the site? I don't believe that falls under your jurisdiction, but can you describe that for all of us so we know that whatever's leaving the premises will be safe?
As far as I know, it falls under 4 different entities, if you will. ATF, DOT, state, and myself, or the fire department. Because when they're loading up, they have another magazine on their trucks. They load that up. All the placards have to be in operation on display. The vehicle itself has to be in proper working order, and the magazine itself, which gets inspected every year, and again, on sites when they show up to do the blasting, our detail inspects the truck, make sure it has all the proper permits, all the numbers match up with the license and the permits, and at any time, if there's an issue, we can notify myself, the guys will notify me, the deputy on duty, or the state, or the DOT, or an ATF. So they're highly, like Ed was saying, they're highly I lost the word, but they're highly involved. So it is. It's not something we take lightly, and that is why we did a site visit with all three of us, and the owner. So.
Councilor Hecht?
Thank you. Is there a special certification or training of the people that handle these, both the delivery of it to Gloucester and the people that handle it in Gloucester and then the people who deliver it out of Gloucester?
Yes, yes, and yes.
So they're all certified to be
They're certified at
explosives
many
handlers or
different
something?
levels, because what you asked, there's different levels in there. But yes, they are certified. They have to go through courses. They have to go through training to be licensed, and then at that point, the state also inspects them and certifies them, and ATF, I believe, also looks at them also. There is a big supervision of it, if you will.
And further, is this for the use of this gentleman's company solely, or
Yes.
is it also
Yes.
to be distributed to others?
Yeah, because he's not allowed, I don't believe, store enough to distribute to other companies, just for your use.
Yeah, there isn't enough storage capability
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. And I will close the public hearing and call for the committee report.
Thank you, Adam.
On a motion by Councillor Holgram, seconded by Councillor Lumberg, the Planning and Development Committee voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to recommend that the City Council grant a license under GZO, Chapter 8, Fire Prevention and Protection, Section 8(1), license for storing inflammables, MGL, Chapter 148, Section 13, and 527, CMR 1 for storage of inflammables at 200R Magnolia Ave, Assessors Map 197, Lot 17, owner Edward C. Ackerley, specifically to store 2 magazines of 2,200 pounds of Class 1.1 explosives, conditioned as follows: that annual proof of inspections by the State Fire Marshal's Office and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is provided to the city clerk, and I so move.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments? This is just a, is this a roll call? No. No roll call. Simple majority. All those in favor say it. Discussion? Oh, discussion, sure. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Councilor Nolan.
This actually is, it's in my personal backyard, basically, and in my business backyard. I've known Ed for about 30 years now. He runs a great, successful, friendly, and safe company in the city. This is certainly going to save him time and money to better manage his business, and I will be supporting this tonight.
Councilor LeBlanc. Oh, Cox, please.
After speaking about marijuana for a couple hours, I'm really excited to actually see something with enough regulation. So I will be supporting this tonight.
Councilor LeBlanc.
I'm also going to support this tonight. I have a few of my friends that blast and do, I forget the word, but anyway, they told me it was highly, yeah, they blow things up. Highly regulated and almost 0 accidents, so to speak. So I know Mr. Ackerley runs a really good business. I did some research on him, asked about him. So I'm looking forward for him to streamline his business and not take that ride out of town. And it's good to see the local city government supporting local businesses to help them benefit. So absolutely yes tonight.
Anyone else? Councilor Memhard.
I just ask if there's room up there for the police to have a shooting range, since it sounds like such a great place. No, okay, just checking.
Okay. Anybody else? We're going to vote.
Nobody else here.
Well, he might,
Through the
he might
chair.
spoil it
Through
for
the
himself
chair.
now that he's, yeah,
The,
you got it.
The explosive storage, there's 2 magazines also, I'm going to need a 3rd magazine to store detonators. So there'll be a total of three compartments. I just want to add that. That's a very small amount of explosives, but it's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree that the limiting of transporting these materials all over the highway back and forth to Shirley is not a good thing. This is a much better solution. So, having said all that, everybody, okay, this is simple majority. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Akerley. Approved. Okay, next order of business, Madam Clerk. Council vote, none. And unfinished business, I don't think we have any of that. So the next is individual councilors' discussions, including reports by appointed councilors to committees. And we have on the agenda tonight an update on the Poet Laureate Selection Committee by City Council Representative Paul Lundberg. I will say that the mayor has requested that the process that was started over a year ago be restarted. She felt that the advertisement for the process did not generate enough widespread knowledge of the process. Hence, there were only 2 applicants. The Committee for the Arts had some difficulties in getting a quorum at several junctures along the way. And so Mayor said, let's just start it over again cleanly, and we're going to do that, working with the administration. Hopefully, that only take a couple of months instead of over a year and with no conclusive result. Councillor Cox.
Is it true that the committee was able to select a person out of the 2? And
The selection committee, then it went to the Committee for the Arts and then to the mayor, and the mayor is the one who appoints. And the mayor declined to make an appointment.
Okay. How long was that? I feel like you've been on this search for 2 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel like she advertised, this is what she got. The committee made its recommendation and then
Well, the committee
said who the recommendation was in some public forums, and I just feel like it's unfair, regardless of, I know it's at the mayor's discretion, but regardless of that, I think it's in bad form to allow the committee to go through the entire process and volunteer their time to do this process, to then make the recommendation only to have her make a decision after multiple year process that there wasn't enough applications submitted. That being said, I think had it been pulled back a long time ago, because we knew how many applications were in over 2 years ago, that at this point, I think it's in bad taste to start the process over after someone was selected and told that they were selected. Just my opinion.
Thank you. All right, next order is councilor's request to the mayor or any particular commentary. We'll start with Councillor Hecht.
None.
Councillor Gilman.
I think everyone remembers that I've put in a request to the mayor to ask for National Grid to come here to Gloucester to present kind of a debrief of the storm at the end of October, beginning of November, where some of us were out of power for almost 4 days, about 3,600 in Gloucester, and I think 350,000 throughout the state. And I put through a second request of more recently on the same matter, and it was sent from Public Works to administration. I was happy to hear that there is a state, like a check-in of this whole matter that is in process right now, And there will be a public hearing that I plan on attending on February 15th. It's a Thursday night, and the closest one, the only day I can attend, is at the McCarthy Middle School in Chelmsford at 7 p.m. on Thursday, February 15th. And I've closed the loop back with administration, and I've asked if they want Public Works to join me or to give me information that I can articulate in terms of what happened and what we can do better, what National Grid can do better, because if this particular almost 4-day power outage occurred in the middle of winter during the cold spell, it would have been much, much worse than it was around Halloween. So I'm passionate about this, and I just wanted anyone to know if anybody wants to join me. If you have any concerns you'd like me to submit as part of my testimony, that I will be there representing our city, and I will make sure that Public Works and administration, if they want to add to my commentary, that they're welcome to be part of that. So I just wanted to mention that, and also to let everyone know that my first experience at the MMA conference was great. It was just great talking to all of the vendors, and I got incredible information on recycling and trash and recreational marijuana. I stopped by a lot of the booths, and we went to some really very helpful seminars. I also represented our council in the business meeting on Saturday morning, and had an excellent presentation on walkability, which was really cool, by an author of a book. And I took 3 pages of notes, so when I pull that together, I'll make sure I share it with all of you, but it definitely was very, very interesting. And I also attended the business meeting with the mayor, and participated in her voting process for the city of Gloucester. So I was sitting next to her, just watching her put the vote up. But it was a new process for me, and I really did enjoy it. So I wanted to just thank those of you who joined me. It was fun, and it was a great learning experience. So that's it. Thank you.
Councilor O'Hara?
Thank you. I want to support Councilor Gilman in a request to have National Grid come before us to identify what the issues are. This being 2018, it's amazing how many emergency generators people are requesting, where years ago no one had emergency generators. And Councilor Gilman's correct as far as the timing of the year. We need to have reliability, but people have to understand that with that said, that more than likely trees will need to be majorly removed as far as trimming and pruning and cutting back. I want to thank Councilor President Lundberg for allowing the special meeting to take place tonight. I want to thank the councilors for listening. Obviously, the pains that the 8 people who spoke, and they were just a small fraction of those who were impacted. That's a real issue that we as a city need to address. I've put in a request to ask the mayor's office to look into our insurance and the potential coverage. They spoke, they took the advice, they listened to the city and parked their cars. Obviously, if they knew that they were going to be destroyed, I'm sure they wouldn't have parked there. This was clearly an issue which was well identified. The National Weather Service identified major flooding taking part in Gloucester. It's documented. You can go on a website and read it. That I feel my job as a city council is to represent the people, and I feel very strongly that we as a city have to look at it good and strong, what we can do to help these innocent people who park their cars. I also want to speak that this isn't the only issue that's going to happen pertaining to Gloucester High School. It's pretty well documented that whether it's global warming, I'm not a scientist, but the rising tides are taking place. I think on January 4th, we saw a good indication of what's to come. And we as a city, being a coastal community, have to prepare for that. We have a high school that clearly is in a flood zone. I don't think the waters are going to be receding anytime soon. What's going to happen next? Where are we going to put these children? Gloucester High School could be the next victim of the flood. So we as a city, we as a council, we need to start talking and looking at where the alternatives are for our Gloucester High School. I also want to mention that on Monday, the 29th, there'll be a blood drive at the Magnolia Library. The American Red Cross has an extreme shortage of blood due to winter storms, the flu that many of us have been impacted by. So those of us who can donate, please consider donating. Thank you very much.
Councillor Holmgren?
Thank you. Yes, I have a couple of things. I wanted to mention that the group Cape Ann Local Action on February 4th, which is Super Bowl Sunday, but it's a bit earlier than the Super Bowl, so that's a good thing, is going to have Catherine Glenn of the Office of Coastal Zone Management come and speak and talk with us a bit about what the City of Gloucester has been doing in the way of coastal resilience. In the wake of this flood, so to speak, I think it's a very good idea to know what the city has been doing and to know what we can do to help. I also want to say that I submitted the first council request to the mayor of 2018, asking for the city to look into different ways to disseminate information that are maybe budget friendly and also inclusive of people who don't necessarily have access to social media. So whether that would be maybe expanding the capabilities of See-Click-Fix or even just instituting a simple 800 number that people can call in. That's something that I hope the administration considers. Thank you.
Councillor Memhard?
Thank you. I have two quick items. The first, following up on what Councillor O'Hara was speaking to, the city did commission in 2015 what's known as the Kleinfelder report, which is available online. It's a 70 or 80 page study of the impact of global warming and rising tides on our community. The areas around the high school were identified as a high priority exposure. Just bring to our attention there are a number of public infrastructure items, including our sewer pumping station and a number of sewer substations, which the DPW is well aware are all on this exposure list and which we really do need to concern ourselves with. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about it, and we need to plan ahead. The second item is a local one. We have scheduled a meeting on Thursday, February 15th at the library's Friend Room, following up on Councillor O'Hara and Budget Ordinance Administration's recommendation to implement some recommendations of the ad hoc parking committee around the beaches. And after our fiasco of changing the Williams Court traffic direction from one-way to two-way to one-way and back and forth, I certainly learned my lesson as a Ward 1 councillor, and I want to make sure I'm out in front of the public process to inform the neighborhoods around Good Harbor Beach and Long Beach in Gloucester, which we will be implementing with your approval, your consideration, new parking regulations, which will include, in particular, a number of areas reserved for resident sticker parking only during the summer season. And that's something that we haven't, that's a tool that we have not used extensively. It's used on the fort a little bit. It's used up in Lanesville around the quarries a little bit and some of the beaches. But resident sticker parking only, which is distinct and different from beach parking, is a tool that we have available to help limit and protect residents' rights from illegal beach parking that overwhelms some of those neighborhoods. So I'm just putting out in front. I hope you will all participate, and to the extent you can, help me promote this ordinance information session for the Ward 1 area. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's probably something we should, your mention of the Kleinfelder report, something that we should consider perhaps formalizing a request to the administration for a presentation to the City Council about where things stand from a scientific and engineering standpoint on some of those issues, because rather than just sit here anecdotally, and I think you know, everyone is pretty well aware that we got something to deal with here, so we'll figure that out and do that. Okay, Councilor Nolan.
Over the past few weeks with the cold weather, the rain, the storms, the frost even, and the plowing, we have encountered a lot of potholes in the area, and I just want to recognize and thank the DPW for coming out and responding to, I would say, 90% of what we have going on, and I look forward to getting the rest done, and well job.
Councillor Cox?
Thank you. Wanted to bring a couple events to your attention. Thursday, January 5th at Jalapenos, there's a fundraiser for Cape Ann Animal Aid that is a percentage of the food, and that is takeout and eat-in. So eat up, it's for the animals. Saturday, February 3rd is the Rotary Polar Plunge. So, you know, another exciting polar plunge in the city of Gloucester. It's at 10:30 at Long Beach. I will be very sad to miss it. I've been asked to speak at a green conference in Boston on the 3rd. So while I really just have a huge problem with public speaking, I'd rather do that than jump in the water at this point. In regards to what Councillor Memhard said about the meeting on February 15th regarding the beach parking, I just want to say that there's a lot of seasonal houses there, so it might require multiple meetings, maybe one in the spring to get the attention of those seasonal homeowners that are going to be impacted heavily regarding this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor LeBlanc?
Thank you. So up here at the dais, the speakers that are on either side of us have been turned, so it's very difficult for the councilors to hear the public comment. We can hear it through the speaker, we can hear each other through our speaker in front of us, but when there's people at the podium, it's very difficult for us to hear. So if we can get one of these speakers